The adopted children of Shu'i'sheeka. Humanity's first alien encounter and its first alien friends. The species from Shu'i'sheeka, respectfully referred to as Shu'i'sheeka, a simple modification to show their homeworld's ownership of them, are now considered sibling species to life in the Sol system. Although they're landlocked to the volcanic caverns of Duelicus due to cultural and physiological reasons, their influence in magnetic technology, crystalline biology, ideas of diversity, and more pervade throughout the entire empire. This relationship hasn't always existed, however. At the beginning of the 22nd century, both biospheres were alone. The story of solar Shu'i'sheeka first contact primarily stands on the surface of Shu'i'sheeka, the fourth planet in the Shu system. After thousands of years of peace, the crystalline animal species known as Mekin waged a brutal civil war between faction castes. As is relatively common knowledge, the faction that met up with humanity is a fairly xenophilic, though isolationist people. However, the five-pronged war was waged between a collection of factions. While the interrelational politics separating the group would be an interesting lesson, it's not relevant to the event in question. What is relevant are the whispers of an instant spatial teleportation device circulating the planet. This instant teleportation device used the exotic quantum phenomenon known as quantum slip, and is the single most dangerous technology a species can possess. Created by the Shapers faction, and independently some years before in Sol, the basics of the device are to center on a particle affected by Q-slip, ionize it, while keeping it charged, lock onto another particle affected by Q-slip, and then switch the lone receiver particle with the entire spatial bubble beach surrounding the sender. This has its dangers alone, but the universe has a wild menagerie of deadly caveats. The quantum slip effect has one potentially disastrous trait. A trait so disastrous both Shu'i'sheeka and Imperial scientists conclude it is the #1 reason a reality in which instant teleportation across space wouldn't herald a populated galaxy. The quantum slip effect compound. If any affected particle in the sender particle's bubble has the same charge as the sender particle, it forms its own bubble that will also join in the teleportation event. This secondary bubble can hold more similar particles which can continue the process ad nauseum. Luckily, this eventuality can be mathematically calculated and accounted for, allowing for ships larger than a single Q-slip bubble to make single slips and to avoid the teleportation cascade. All that being said, the risk of that happening is very low on planets where the Q-slip sender particle in use has a low concentration. However, with the choice of Casium as the sender particle, Shu'i'sheeka was not one of those places, and the Shaper faction was aware of that. The Shapers built 2 slip-capable vessels to be strapped to a series of rockets and shot through rail out of the atmosphere. Shortly before the scheduled launch, another faction, disdainfully labeled the Vandals, attacked and stole one of the ships while it was in transit to be fitted with rockets. This particularly warlike faction was known for its excessive use of tactical quantum weaponry, otherwise known as primitive fission bombs. Fission bombs that had, in recent months, destroyed a fission reactor complex belonging to another faction. Although Shu'i'sheeka are remarkably radiation resistant, the dangers of radioactive contaminants with high concentrations of Casium covering swaths of the planet was not lost on the Shapers. Somewhat pessimistic with the state of their own species, and with a culture embracing nature and ecological coexistence, it wasn't expected that their pleas to not use their technology as a weapon would be listened to, especially by the faction that destroyed so much of Shu'i'sheeka for the gain of their Mekin ascendancy. The Shapers had little time to prepare. They must find and destroy the other ship, or leave before the Vandals had a chance to completely destroy everything. Of course, over-the-table negotiations, science, visualization forms, and more were offered, all refused. Under the table, Shaper and the allied secret forces infiltrated Vandal territory, only to be found out and killed. They were down to their last idea: flee. In an unprecedented rush, Shaper cities were evacuated and wildlife preserves were trucked to the launch site. What was left of the physical libraries were boxed and loaded. The base was chock full of life, knowledge, and supplies, and it was sent off. Other ships had already begun pre-production. None would see the light of day. 4 days after the launch of the Meccan Ark, the entire western hemisphere of Shu'i'sheeka instantly superimposed upon itself. In a fluke of the now amalgamated satellite array, the emergency slip sent the Ark to the 557th Survey Star System under the Shaper Directorate. Sol. Imperial ships, noticing the anomaly, went to investigate the object. Upon further inspection, it was revealed to be a spaceship. Human ships use a different particle than the original Shaper 3 winged barge, and were able to slip to and from the derelict, and after weeks spent floating, humanity was able to use an upgraded volunteer synth as a supercomputer to decode the Meccan language. Through basic words and mathematical constants, the Meccan were able to communicate their physiological need for a specific range of gravity to function, for which they'd barter access to any non-weapon technologies or knowledge they brought along with no expectation of further exchange. The Empire, excited to see the wonders they had, agreed to the terms with the added insurance of Imperial supervision of the refuge creation and flat monitoring thereafter. The Meccan agreed to the change and were slipped to Duelicus, where their entire ship landed intact. From there, the Shu'i'sheeka entered the fledgling Duelican biosphere, their wholly different biology protecting them and humanity from cross-contamination with each other. The only true surface city on Duelicus, Refuge, was constructed, a cultural preserve for the Shu'i'sheeka. Meccan technology spread, giving humanity the magnetic revolution. Duelican culture grew and intertwined with Meccan, even going so far as to name the previously uncategorized purpose-made Duelican humans Mekabo, or strong people, in the Meccan tongue. Over the past 6 decades, the Meccan have grown from disparate refugees to saviors of their biosphere, and sibling species to humanity in our great shared empire. Their story rings true at the bells of all the Empire's tenets, and we hope the Shu'i'sheeka, those around for their planet's tragedy or not, know humanity treasures its time with them and the opportunity to unite with them.